Hi everybody. So this is part 2 of the midterm implementation. What I'm going to go through in this part of the presentation is the actual work of implementing the screens. So that includes the start screen, listing all of the menu items, taking the person's order request, and then going through the finalization process of taking and closing the order, providing the total to the user of what the total amount of the order is, taking the tender, and then providing information about change as well as receipt information. So all of this implementation will be done inside of my static void main method and or supplemental methods that I'll be creating. And this is all going to be done inside of my midterm class. This is the class that was created when I created the project. The class name is the same name as the project name itself, and that is where my static void main lives. So the static void main, as we've talked about before, is the entry point into the application. This is where your root or primary program logic lives, is within the static void main. From here you'll do a lot of base initialization of variables and calling supplemental routines and basically providing all the functionality in your app. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of just pseudocode out all of the work that's going to actually be done in the application. So the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to define our menu items. So define menu items. Next step will be to list, or we'll do a welcome message, and then we will list menu items for this order. We will prompt for an item to be ordered. And then this whole routine will loop until the input equals 0. So that'll be the first segment. Following that segment, we will then look at that kind of 0 input. So if input equals 0, we will show the total for the order, prompt for tender, receive tender payment amount, and present change. After that, we will ask if the user wants a receipt. If yes, we will print all items in the order along with the total, tender, and change. Alright, so let's go ahead and start with the first step, which is to define the menu items. So these menu items will be kind of system-wide. I'm recording this after some additional lectures around utility classes and things like that, so you may watch this and go, well, why isn't he using a utility class to kind of offload or separate out the declaration of the menu items? And at the time of this assignment, we didn't talk about utility classes, so I'm going to be doing the actual declaration of my menu items right inside of my static void main. Alright, so I'm going to start off with just an array of menu items, and I'm just going to call this the menu. I'm going to go ahead and use the curly bracket initialization for an array, and what that basically says is that the inside of the curly brackets is going to be a list of menu items, and this list will be our collection or our array of menu items that will be inside of our variable menu. Now, a menu item is a class that we created in the previous video, and this class is very simplistic. It has a name and it has a price. So my goal is to create a series of new menu items, each one being the definition of one of the items on our menu. So looking back at the mock-up, we have items like hamburger, cheeseburger, deluxe burger, chicken sandwich, side salad, chicken salad. Those are our menu items. So we need to create a menu item object for each one of these in our array. So to do that, we're going to create new menu item. And what I'd like to be able to do here is I'd like to be able to say hamburger and then put in that it's 0.99 cents. Now in order to accomplish this, menu item needs to have a constructor. And if you look at the exception here, it says constructor menu item and class menu item cannot be applied to the given types. What that is talking about is that there is no constructor that accepts these parameters, a string and a float or a double. So to make this a true or correct line of code, we need to go back to menu item and we need to actually create a constructor that accepts a string and a double. Now to do a constructor, you simply will do public, the name of the class, menu item, and then the parameters that we're going to pass in. So we'll have a string called item name, and we'll have a double, and we'll call it item price. Now constructors are methods, so we'll have curly brackets to define a method body, and then inside of this method body we're going to initialize our private field variables, name and price, with the parameters that are passed in. So to do that, we'll do this dot name, and you'll notice that NetBeans highlights name for us, so we reference name here. It's the same name that's declared above, and we're going to set this equal to item name, and this dot price equals item price. Again, item price here is the parameter, where price in this context is the private field. Now remember that the way that these initialization lines are read is that the value of item name is being stored in the field name. The value of item price is being stored in the field price. Now you may be thinking, well, where is item name and item price coming from? This line inside of our array declaration, new menu item, is calling this constructor. So whenever you use the new keyword in front of a class, anything preceding that is calling the constructor for that class. In this case, the menu item class has a constructor, menu item, that takes a string and a double. So this constructor is being called by this line of code by us saying new menu item, and then in parentheses we put the string, item name, and a double, item price. And I'm just going to continue doing that for each one of the items. So menu item cheeseburger, and based on the sample it is $1.59, comma, new menu item deluxe burger, and that's $2.99. $3.49, and you'll see that I'm putting commas after each one of the items. What that says to the compiler is that each one of these new menu item string double is an item in the array. So this is a complete item. What I have highlighted now is a single item in the array. And then by adding a comma after it, basically just tells the compiler that there's another item in the array. And then the last item is new menu item chicken salad. And that item is $5.25. Alright. So we've now declared our array of menu items. So we now have the menu items to be presented. I'm now just going to do a standard out with a basic string that says welcome to, oops, sorry about that, my cool example. Restaurant. I'm then going to proceed to list out all of the menu items in my menu array on the following lines. So to do that, I'm going to start with a for loop. So again, int I equals 0. I'm declaring I as an integer variable, and it equals 0. And then I'm going to loop while the statement in here is true. So as long as I is less than menu.length, the loop will continue. And it will continue by iterating or adding 1 to I after every iteration of the loop. So the first iteration of the loop will be 0, and as long as the length of the menu is greater than 0, it will execute at least one time for the loop. Now on this line, what we're going to want it to do is to actually output the first item in the array. So I'm going to declare menu item variable, and this will be the current item in menu. I'm going to say that item is equal to menu I. So that's grabbing the current item in the menu. I'm then going to do a standard out, and I'm going to begin by printing I plus 1. So I will do I plus 1. I in the first iteration will be 0, so I want it to list 1 through X, and since arrays are 0 based, I always have to add 1 to them. So I plus 1 will write out the number 1. So I'll do plus a dot space plus item, item being the current item that we're looking at in the menu, dot get name. So what that should do for us is it'll print out a list of all of our items in the array. Now one other thing I do want to add, so I'm going to do plus, parentheses, I'm going to do a /t for a tab, and do another plus, and then what I want to output is item.getPrice. Alright, so what that should do for us is it'll output the current position in the array, I, plus 1, and then it'll concatenate to that the name of the item, and then it'll do a tab, and then it'll output the price of that item. So if we do an F6 and run, you'll see it below here. You get hamburger 99 cents, cheeseburger $1.59, deluxe burger $2.99, chicken sandwich $3.49, side salad is $2.50, and the chicken salad is $5.25. So the next step in the process is for us to prompt the user to select an item to add to their order. So we'll start out by saying choose an item above to add to your order. Now to read in that input, we need to set up a scanner. We'll declare a scanner variable in. NetBeans wants us to add the import statement for the scanner, and then we'll say in equals new scanner. So we're calling the scanner's constructor, and this constructor requires us to provide a input stream. So we'll do system.in. We've now declared a scanner, and what we will do is we're going to capture from the scanner the input from the user. So I'm going to capture a string input, so that'll be my variable input of type string, And what I will capture from that is in.next. So whatever line of text is entered by the user, that will be read in by our scanner. Now that item will be our prompt. We'll read in the selection, and then we will actually add the selection to the order. Now up to this point we haven't actually declared an order variable. So to declare the order, I'm actually going to go back up to the top, and after I define my menu items, I'm going to do my welcome, and then I'm going to initialize an order. And my order is another class that we created in part 1 of this video. This order contains a small series of private variables, which are the order date, order ID, and items, as well as tender. And to use this class, we'll have to create an instance of it under our static void main. So we'll say order. That will be the type, and then I'm just going to call the variable name O. So we have a variable O of type order. And I'm going to go ahead and do an inline initialization. I'm going to say new order. And that will create for us a new order. Now, there are some private fields, calendar and order ID, that do not have setters. They only have gets. So to initialize those, I'm actually going to create a parameterless constructor. And to do that, it's just like we did the constructor for menu item, but we don't have any parameters. So it's public order, open close parentheses, no parameters, and then we'll have our method body. And inside of this method body, I'm going to initialize order date to be equal to calendar dot get instance. And what that'll do is it will go out and fetch the current calendar or date and time when this order was created. Then for order ID, what I actually do is I'm going to modify this. Instead of making it parameterless, I'm going to accept an order ID OID. So we'll have to pass in an order ID when we create our instance of our order. And then the last thing that we'll need to do is items, which is our array list of menu items, the items on the order. We're going to initialize that to a new array list of menu item. And that will allow us to actually have items equal to the array list. If we did not put this line in, we would end up with items equaling null and a null reference exception when we went to try to say items.add or items.size. We would end up getting a null reference because the variable items equals null until it's actually initialized with new array list menu item. Alright, so back to midterm. So we'll put in here, I'll just put 1. So we've now initialized O, our order variable, to a new order with an ID of 1. We list all the menu items, we prompt for an item, and then here I'm going to actually take the item that was selected and I'm going to add it to the order. To parse input, we are going to use the integer dot parse int. Now with this, we're going to want to wrap it into a try-catch block. Now what this will do for us is it will capture any invalid inputs. Now we'll want to also declare a variable outside of the try-catch block that will be our parsed input. So we'll call this int input will be our variable that will capture our integer version of our input. And we'll say if we have an exception, then int input equals -1. So we'll now have capture the input, and from here we're going to take that selection and add it to the order. So order dot add menu item, and the menu item we're going to add is going to be menu item SEL item. So we'll declare a variable SEL item of type menu item, and we will say menu, and we will do int input -1. And then we will take SEL item and add it to the order. Now we could do some additional checking here and ensure that the input integer is within the range of the menu. So we can say if int input is greater than or equal to 1, and int input is less than or equal to menu.length, then do these steps, else we can just system out and say invalid menu selection. Alright, so up to this point, if we go ahead and run this, we will get welcome to my cool example restaurant, a list of the menu items, and it will ask us to choose an item above to add to the order. So I'll select number 1, hit enter, and since that was a good selection, the application will end. I'll run again. I'm going to put a 7 in, and it'll tell us invalid menu selection, and again the application ends. So at this point we have two things that we need to handle. One is that after an item is selected, we don't get the opportunity to select another item. We simply lose everything. So what we need to do is we need to wrap this prompt in a loop and allow that loop to execute until the input is 0. The second thing we need to do is then have a mechanism for breaking out of the loop when the input is 0. So to start off, we will determine the endpoint, which I believe is going to be right here. So we'll say while true, perform the loop. Now the loop that we're performing needs to start when we first spit out the menu. So I'm going to put do right there. For formatting, I'm going to indent everything one spot. And now what should happen is every time an item is selected, it will add the item to the order. Maybe we should signify that with an output saying that SEL item get name has been added to order, and then we will output o.get order ID. Okay, perfect. So if we F6 and we choose that we want to add a hamburger, we'll get a response saying that hamburger has been added to order, and then it'll list the menu again. We can then choose 2. And now we've had a cheeseburger has been added, and the loop continues. And then if I put in a 0, it'll say invalid menu selection, but the loop still continues. So at this point I'm going to hit the stop button, stop debugging, and I'm going to do some additional if or else if statements in here. So else if int input equals 0, we'll want to break from the loop, exit the loop, which will allow us to continue on. So that will be our first method. Okay, so we can run this again, and we'll say, oops, hamburger has been added, cheeseburger has been added, and 0. And that point it exits. One thing that we don't have is we're not actually prompting that 0 is the exit, so I'm going to add here another system out that will basically be 0 dot close order. So now when we run again, 6 is to close the order. And just to kind of differentiate it, I'm going to put it in all caps. Alright, great. So we can now take selections, add them to an order. We can notify that the item has been added. We'll go ahead and write out another print line just for clarity. And when the loop equals 0, we exit. So that's taken care of. So now if the input is 0, which basically infers that we've made it this far because we've exited the loop, we need to show the total for the order. So to do that, we'll do an S out, and we'll say order total is, and we'll do O dot get total. Okay, then we will go ahead and prompt for tender. So we'll do another system out. How would you like to pay? Please enter tender received. Now we declared our scanner in up here, but the problem is that this scanner was declared inside of our do loop. To correct for this and make it more universally acceptable, I'm going to highlight it, cut it, move it out of the do loop, and move it up here at the very beginning of our static void main. That'll make that in variable, that's our scanner, more universally accessible. So this line here will still work, as it did. And now down here we'll be able to say in dot next, and we can go ahead and do next double, and we will declare a double called tender. Just do a little cleanup. So that will be the tender amount, and then we will say O dot add tender, and we will add tender, and then we will S out. Your change is O dot get change. Great. So now if we F6, we can say we want a hamburger, a cheeseburger, and a side salad. And close order. So our total is 607. I'll pay with a 10. And my change is 3.9299999997. That's because of the rounding off factor. That's why it's 3.92999999. Repeating. So our math is working. One of the things that we're going to need to take into consideration, which we haven't up to this point, is formatting for currencies. So we're going to go ahead and make a quick adjustment for that to help kind of make things a little more consistent, a little more uniform, and a little more of what we're expecting. So to do that, we're going to have to use the string.format. So we're going to start back here up at the top, and we're going to do the format inside of our routine that lists the items for the order, so items that can be ordered. And let me rephrase that. Ordered. Okay. Now, a number of you actually use this method of doing string.format, and for the most part it worked fine, but one of the things that is kind of unusual is the actual string that is used to do the formatting. It's kind of cryptic and a little just odd. Instead of using this method, I'm actually going to take a different approach, and I'm going to use one that is a whole lot more universal and actually takes into account what is referred to as the locale of where the application is running. So if maybe this application was sent to someone who lives in Europe or some sort of European country, they would actually see a formatting that is correct to their location instead of it just automatically being formatted in US dollars. So to do this, I'm going to, and for clarity purposes, I'm going to break line here, and I'm going to get rid of this string.format. And what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to use a utility class called numberFormat. And inside of numberFormat, there is a method called getCurrencyInstance. The getCurrencyInstance method will return me an object that will have a format method on it. Now, to get this to work, I'm going to have to do an include. NetBeans is yelling at me. So I'm going to do an add import to java.text.numberFormat. I'll do that, and then I'll be able to do .format. And you'll notice here that there's an overload that accepts a double. So I'm going to pass into this item.getPrice. So if you remember, item is the current item in the loop. GetPrice retrieves the price of that current item. That price itself is a double. So we're going to then be passing this double into numberFormat, the currency instance, and then we will do a format call which will pass in the price. Get currency instance is actually a very interesting function. I'm not going to go into a lot of details here, but if you're interested in how that works, you can look at the Java docs associated to it. It's basically a custom implementation of numberFormat that is specific to this locale. Alright, so F6, run that, and you'll see that now our prices are all showing with $ and 2 decimal points, so that's a good start. The second thing that we want to adjust now is when we output the total for the order. So again, we'll do numberFormat dot get current locale dot format, passing in that total. And then on our change, we'll do numberFormat dot get currency instance dot format, and passing get change to format. So if that looks a little cryptic, you may want to go back and listen to this segment again. But basically what we're doing is we're using numberFormat's ability to format a decimal, and the decimal being o.getChange, the decimal being the return value of o.getTotal, and up above the item.getPrice. Okay, so if we run all of this, we can add a hamburger, a cheeseburger, and a side salad. And if we close the order, our total is $607. We'll provide $10 to pay, and our change back is $3.93. Great. So at this point, we've been able to add an item to our order. We have been able to pay, get our change back. Now the final step is to prompt, would you like a receipt? So we'll start with an S out, and we'll simply say, would you like a receipt? Y or N. We will do an in, or we'll do string str input, which will be our variable to catch our input, and then we'll say in.next. And then we'll just do a simple if statement. So if str input dot equals, and we can pass in here a string, and we'll put in a capital Y, or str input dot equals a lowercase y, then we will print out a receipt, else we will do nothing. So to start off, we'll do a for loop and loop over the order.getItems. So we'll start out with for int I equals 0, and then while I is less than o.getItems dot size, we will continue our loop. So we will do menu item equals o.getItems dot get, passing in I will get us the current item in menu in the get items from the order. The current item, we will then do a standard out, and we will just print item.getName plus item.getPrice, but we will do that with number format dot get currency instance dot format of the item price. Then after that, we'll do a system out with a line, system out for total, dot get currency instance dot format, and inside of here we will put o dot get total I'm going to change that layout. This has no functional difference, it just makes it a little bit easier to read. Okay, and then we'll do system out tender colon space plus number format dot get currency instance dot format o dot get tender, and then an s out for the change, and number format dot get currency instance dot format o dot get change. And just to make it pretty, we'll do another print line. Okay, so if we F6 and run, we'll add a hamburger, a cheeseburger, chicken sandwich, and a side salad. Close the order. Total is $8.57. We'll pay with a 10. Change is $1.34. Yes to a receipt. And there is our order. 1 hamburger, 1 cheeseburger, chicken sandwich, and a side salad. Pull up my calculator, 99 cents, plus 1.59, plus 3.49, plus 2.5 is $8.57, minus $10 is $1.43 change. Alright, so I hope that this video is helpful, helps you kind of understand my process for implementing